Welcome back to the SiriusXM College Lacrosse pregame show.
20 seconds to go. 3 from Chris Kavanaugh, 3 from Pat Kavanaugh. 2 hat tricks for each of those brothers. 3 for McLean, and Notre Dame is going to watch the last 5 seconds bleed on the national semifinal. 2 and they will walk in as the #1 team in the country. Maryland 3 seconds away. Virginia has it, 1 second, no shot comes, and the Maryland Terrapins are going to the national championship game for the 17th time in their history.
We have the final call from Saturday. Maryland and Notre Dame in the national championship today. It's the College Lacrosse National Championship pregame show on SiriusXM Channel 84. I am Denton Day. You can tweet me at the Denton Day your thoughts on today's matchup. We're just about 45 minutes away from the start of the game, originally scheduled for 1. It got moved up to 12 p.m. noon on the East Coast due to weather. Let's head out to the phones. Hutton Jackson there with us, talking a little bit of gambling. We'll get to some of the gambling stuff, Hutton, but I want to start with the actual matchup itself. When you see Notre Dame and Maryland on paper, the first thought that comes to your mind is what?
I see some very comparable teams. Both are backed by some strong defenses and, world-class goaltenders. Face-off position is strong for both. Luke Weirman and Will Lynch are both #1 and #2 in face-off adjusted efficiency this year. So they're 2 of the best going at it at the stripe. And then I see, offenses that are, really finding their groove this year. I'd give the edge to Notre Dame definitely for their offensive depth. But Maryland's been playing well as well. So 2 very comparable teams that, played earlier in the year, and the score was actually closer than probably the final score indicated. It was 14-9 in favor of Notre Dame, but I think it's going to be a closer one.
So you mentioned the face-off matchup. We've talked about that a lot so far this morning. Who do you think has the advantage between the 2 of them? Is there any chance that one guy wins, maybe 65, 70% of the face-offs?
I don't see it coming close to that. I think it's going to be very close to 50-50. I probably would give the edge to Luke Weirman, a slight edge. He's just his ability to create offense and win it cleanly, even against some top opponents. He played Jake Naso against Duke. Last week against Anthony Gabriel, he played really well. I think Will Lynch is going to give him a much better game. But his ability to create offense, I think I'd give him a slight edge. So maybe if we do see it in favor of anybody, it'll be towards them. But I don't see any face-off guy getting above 60% against their opponent today.
Does Weirman have a move? What makes him so good at the Yaks?
I think, honestly, they both have a good arsenal of moves. So, he's quick on the clamp, but he can counter really well, too. So even if, he is losing the clamp, he makes it a 50-50 scrum around the X. So that way, his wing play can kind of come in and help get the ground balls even when he's not winning. So I think that's what makes him, really strong. When he last played UVA earlier in the season, he was coming off a leg injury, and he still ended up going 57%. But, I think you could see even when he's not at 100%, his ability to kind of counter and, kind of take the game within the game of it's really almost like a wrestling match there. Same thing can be said about Will Lynch, too. He played Alex Stathakis last week, one of the best face-off guys in the country who a lot of people thought actually was going to, outduel him last week. And he ended up, doing way better than a lot of people expected against him, getting Notre Dame a bunch of extra possessions. So I think when it comes down to it, there's not maybe a specific move, but their ability to counter each other and even when they're losing the clamp, adjust so that way they're not giving up fast breaks the other way.
When you watch the Kavanaughs, what do you see with them as a duo?
I just see a ton of toughness and a really high lacrosse IQ. You can't knock their toughness. Last year, Pat Kavanaugh was playing pretty much on one hamstring, had a shoulder injury as well, led his team to a championship. But their lacrosse IQ is so high that they can beat you in so many different ways. We see Chris Kavanaugh a little bit more as a goal scorer and an off-ball finisher, but he can beat you off the dodge. He can also act as a feeder as well. And then Pat, we've seen him score a lot of goals this tournament despite, being more of a facilitator earlier in the year. So I think it's both their toughness and their IQ and the fact that, you get a turnover on them, they're trying to win it back on the ride. They're tenacious on the ride, tenacious on the ground balls. Both these teams are very aggressive on ground balls, but, they make the gritty hustle plays as well that, something that doesn't show up on the stat sheet necessarily.
Talking with Hutton Jackson here on the College Lacrosse National Championship pregame show. You can find him on Action Network and ProLax Talk at Hutton Jackson on Twitter. When it comes to what Maryland did defensively, Hutton, with the way they stopped Connor Schellenberg, I thought Ajax Zapatello was outstanding. If you're placing him on one of the Kavanaughs, which Kavanaugh would you place him on?
I'd put him on Pat just because Pat tends to be the one that runs that offense. It's a double-edged sword just because Notre Dame is so deep, and I think their depth will really come into play in this game, particularly the third-line midfielders. But Zapatello did really well against Pat last game that they played. Pat, I think, still managed to get, maybe 3 assists and had a goal. But Zapatello, caused some turnovers, was all over top of them. And I think if you can take Pat out of the game and make some of these other guys beat you, that gives them the best chance at winning. Again, Notre Dame has some great players too. I think Eric Dobson is a name. He's a midfielder. I think that's going to have to step up both as a shooter and a feeder. Maryland's going to have to play really good off-ball defense as well, just given the amount of, players that can score off-ball. We mentioned Chris Kavanaugh, but Jake Taylor's one of the best finishers inside. Devin McClain's been awesome for Notre Dame this whole season too, both as a finisher, but can also dodge his man too. So I would put Zap, though, on Pat. I think that's the best chance for success. And you saw when they put him on Zawada against Duke, taking away that initiator, taking away, Connor Schellenberger last week, kind of gives you the best chance. And, Maryland's credit to their defense as a unit. They've been able to hold up, and Logan McNaney's been awesome in cage. So I really think that's the best matchup for them. And I honestly think Zap might, come away with a good, whether they win or lose, I think he might come away with, the winning end just because he plays such great sound one-on-one defense. And honestly, to spoiler alert, one of the props I like is Pat Kavanaugh to go under 4.5 points because I think they will lean on their depth a little bit more. And I think Zapatello will be able to take him out of this game. I think he'll still get his, get some shots on goal, still probably score some goals, get some assists. But I think 4.5 is a little high right now for his number going up against Zapatello.
So if they place him on Kavanaugh, you just mentioned you like him to go under the 4.5 points. You also just mentioned about 4 or 5 other guys on Notre Dame that can step up and score, which really speaks to the depth of this Fighting Irish team. But who are those other guys that you think would be in a good position to put the ball in the back of the net? And how would you relate that to potentially some props that you're looking at this afternoon?
Yeah, so I wish we got some props on Devin McClain because I think he's going to be a huge asset to Notre Dame. He had 6 points in their last game against Maryland, 3 goals, 3 assists. He's just so sneaky off ball and such a great finisher, but he played attack at Brown and was one of their main guys. So it's not like he is, solely an off-ball finisher like, say, Jake Taylor, who's also elite at his craft. Devin McClain is, a versatile, well-rounded attackman that happens to be playing midfield for Notre Dame. So I think he's going to be a big key. Jake Taylor's another one. I don't hate Jake Taylor maybe going over, I think it's 2.5 points as his points prop. But I mentioned it earlier, Eric Dobson's the one that I think is really going to have to step up because if Maryland's able to pack in this defense, I think they could have a lot of success. And he has the ability to stretch the defense out because he has a hard shot from outside, but he's also really elite at dodging down the alley. And even if he draws a slide, he's able to feed the inside. So I think Eric Dobson's probably going to be the X factor in this one. I like him to go over 1.5 points. That's my favorite prop. It's juiced to -146, but he's hit this in 11 of 16 games. So you're looking at, a prop that should be probably closer to -220, -200, that you're still getting at -146 on FanDuel. I really like him to go over that number, and I think he's going to be a big key to this, this offense finding a lot of success. And then, to mention some other guys that don't be surprised if you hear their name, maybe even for the first time, during this tournament. But Jeffrey Ricciardelli, he had a goal against Maryland last game. Riley Gray and Will Angrick are all, depth pieces for Notre Dame that can come in and score goals. And, I think it's going to take a team effort for Notre Dame. You're going to see their stars still get their time in the sun. But I really do think offensively Notre Dame's going to have to get all these guys involved in order to beat this Maryland defense.
So that's taking a look at Notre Dame's side of the offense. What about for Maryland? Obviously, Daniel Kelly had a really good game against UVA. They got a bunch of different dudes like Notre Dame that can put the ball in the back of the net. Who do you like to have a big game offensively for Maryland today?
Yeah, so I think it's going to come down to, probably Daniel Maltz, being able to score goals. He's been really great this tournament. When these teams last played, too, I actually thought Maryland did a great job of generating offense. Like I said, I didn't think this final score of 14-9 really indicated how well Maryland played. Liam Entenmann played phenomenal in that game. I think he had 13 saves when these teams last played. They had a lot of good quality looks in the middle. So I think it's going to come down to, these guys. Notre Dame doesn't like to slide to their poles. They like to trust their matchups and then trust Liam Entenmann to make saves. So I think it's going to come down to guys like Eric Spanos to really beat their man. And then, if they do potentially draw a slide, or even if there's no slide, finding those guys off ball like a Daniel Maltz, is going to be key for this Maryland offense to kind of put the ball in the back of the net. You mentioned Kelly. I think he could, be a big part of this as well. So I think that's what's it going to take. And then also not being afraid to push in transition. If Luke Weirman wins it closely or wins it cleanly off the face-off, pushing it in transition, either with him shooting it or passing it off in fast break. And then, if Zapatello or any of these defenders generate cause turnovers, don't be afraid to go against this Notre Dame, defense in transition, because I think that's where they'll find the most success. I think they had 2 or 3 transition goals in this last game against them, and I think that's how you're going to beat Notre Dame, is being able to find those unsettled situations and take advantage of them.
So I'm looking at some of the props for the goalies. I'm seeing Entenmann at 11.5 over under for the saves, and I'm seeing McNanny at 10.5. Oh, there's a little bit of positive money that I'm seeing that at plus 108. Do you like either one of those numbers for these two guys in net today?
Yeah, so I like Liam Entenmann. I'm not crazy about it at the juice that it's currently at. I think it was plus money and now it's not anymore. But I still think he's going to have a big day, because Maryland, you look at this tournament, they've been excellent at their shots on goal percentage. So not only are, they doing well enough on offense, but I think it's a really testament to them. They're getting quality shots. So I think they're going to get quality shots again on Liam Entenmann, which is big, because you're not just hoping that Entenmann saves, the goals or shots that he faces, but you're hoping that he gets enough volume to go over this. So I do like the over 11.5. I think McNaney could also go over 10.5. I just don't really like that number. I wish it was at 9.5. I think, I think the volume of shots is going to be there, but this Notre Dame offense is so efficient that I do worry that you could come up a few saves short if you bet McNaney's. But I would go with Entenmann on that. I think both goalies are going to have to be, lights out in this game, and that's why I tend to lean towards the under 22.5. Just a lean for me, but I do think it could be a little bit more low scoring just because these goaltenders have been so elite.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong here, Hutton. We're talking with Hutton Jackson, Action Network, Pro Lax Talk here with us on the College Lacrosse National Championship pregame show. But it feels like, college lacrosse gambling is still very much in its infancy compared to that of other sports. How sharp are some of these lines? Is there some real opportunities for the gambler to really get one over on Vegas today?
So honestly, this probably isn't the answer a lot of people want to hear, but I think they did a really good job with the spread and total, and even the first half spread and total. So, I probably would make this line 3.5, 4 in favor of Notre Dame. It's -3 at some places. So I lean kind of Notre Dame, but I like to look for, a goal and a half as my edge. So if it was 2.5, I'd probably be all over it. At 3, kind of just a lean for me. And then the total as well, it opened up as 23.5, but that went away very quickly. I think within 5 minutes, people hammered that under. I didn't even have time to bet that one. It was gone before the end of the Maryland UVA game had even finished. But I think they did a really good job with this line, and I think it's testament to the sports books. Over the past 3 or 4 years. I think the first time we had odds on sports books was 2021 national championship with Maryland and Virginia. But the props, I think, is where you can find a lot of value. Just looking at, I like to look at, okay, how many times have this guy gone over, just to kind of give you a sense of what the odds should be. And then look at the matchup, and Dobson's a good example of how, he's gone over this. So you're getting a good price already on the 1.5. But I actually like the fact that I think he matches up well against Maryland. I think they're going to need him to be involved. So I think that's kind of how I like playing the props. So I mentioned the Dobson one and the Pat Cavanaugh one. I also like Chris Cavanaugh to go under 4.5 shots on goal. And that's not really me fading Chris Cavanaugh as a playmaker. I just don't think the volume of shots is going to be there. And I think that he might be forced to be more of a facilitator as well. And then Jack Kors under 2.5 points. Kors could, surprise me and have a big game again today, but the volume of shots just hasn't been there for him. So, again, I don't think we see him go over 2.5 points, even though that's a little bit juiced to the under as well, too. I think that's where bettors need to just remember, just because it's plus money doesn't mean it's a good value. And just because it's, juiced to -150 doesn't mean there's not value there. It's just knowing what the odds should be and not being afraid to, eat the juice a little bit for some of these props.
This total has moved tremendously. As you mentioned, it was like 23. I got it at 21.5. I'm now seeing it 22.5. Where do you standing when it comes to the total today?
Yeah, so I would probably make it 21.5. So that's why I'm surprised that it's creeped back up to 22.5. So I think there are some 22.5s out there, and I bet it personally at the Open myself. It's not a best bet for me. I would have loved it at 23.5. But I do see this being a lower scoring game. You got the short rest. It doesn't always play a factor, but these teams, coming off some tough games on Saturday, despite them kind of running away with it in the end. I think it's going to be close. And the teams are just very. They tend to play at a slower pace, and I think that's where this game's going to go. The thing that worries me is I mentioned, Maryland's best chance at winning this game is probably pushing in transition. So you could see them play a little bit faster. And Notre Dame is just so efficient. They could be playing at a crawling pace. I think they're like 65th slowest in pace, yet they're the most efficient, offense in college lacrosse, even more efficient than the 2022 Maryland team that went undefeated, that even when they are playing at a slow pace, they'll make you pay. So that's why, I don't love the total at 22.5, but I would lean under. I just think it's going to be a grind out game. And if Maryland has any chance of staying in this, they're going to want to slow down the pace a little bit. They're going to want to really, value their possessions. And I think their defense is good enough to give Notre Dame a really good test today. So that's where I would lean on the total.
All right, Hutton, I'll get out of here on this one. Who wins? Who's celebrating at the end?
It's Notre Dame going back to back. They're just all around the best team, I think, in the league. It would surprise me if Maryland won. I wouldn't be completely shocked, but I think it's going to take a perfect game from Maryland. They've been able to put it together, against a really good Duke team and a UVA team. But Notre Dame is just across the board, elite, and they do a lot of things that Maryland does well in winning the ground ball battle and stuff. Notre Dame does that even that much better. So I think the edge of Maryland being really well coached, really knowing their game plan and winning ground balls is kind of gone just because they're playing a team that does the same thing as them, but, at a much better level. And the depth of Notre Dame, I think, is going to prevail in the end. So I think Notre Dame wins their second championship in back-to-back years.
Hutton, greatly appreciate it. Enjoy the game this afternoon, and hopefully you and I both make a little bit of money.
Thank you for having me.
That is Hutton Jackson, Action Network Pro Lax Talk. You can find him on Twitter at Hutton Jackson. Good enough to join us here on the College Lacrosse National Championship pregame show. If you got some picks, send them my way at The Denton Day on Twitter. When we get back, we wrap up the show and we'll give you a little bit of our picks. Who do we think is going to win the College Lacrosse National Championship this afternoon? That on the other side. We'll be back here on College Sports Radio, Channel 84.